Let's have a look at the use of deep half guard as a vehicle to enter into leg locks. First, let's just look at the transition into deep half guard from regular half guards. Okay, many ways to do it, but arguably the most robust and best all round for the purposes of no gi starts with a tight waist grip. So we have a guy down on two knees in front of us, and we're going to start with a basic knee shield in place, basic frame in place as we often do, and then from here we start getting his hand down towards the mat. Now from here, my arm that was across frame will go underneath the near side armpit, and I'll use my other leg as a kind of pendulum as I come up on an elbow and I score my training partner with a tight waist grip. If you turn, you will see that I have an inside hook with my legs. Okay, I have an outside foot and an inside foot. It's the inside foot which is hooked over. Now, I scoop inside my training partner's leg like so. I'm going to make a big rotation to my left that will force my opponent to base out. If he doesn't, he'll fall over because he's holding a whizzer currently. He'll be forced to base out to prevent falling over. The best way for me to do this is to create a pendulum effect with both of my legs. Now guys, be confident. You don't have to stay locked up on your opponent's leg here. Okay, you need mobility in your legs. Locking a triangle will hold him in place, but it's no way to transition into the position that we want. So we need some flexibility with our legs here. We open them and create a kind of a swinging pendulum effect. Be confident that you can hold them in place because you have such tight contact with your two arms. So you don't need tight contact with your legs now. Now, I'm currently facing to my right. I make a complete 180-degree turn out in the other direction. Now, this will force my opponent into a situation where his left knee goes down and his right knee goes up off the floor, like so. And this is what we're looking for. You currently see the location of my right hand. I'm going to switch it to the other side. So I release, and I come through and grip. Let's rotate. Do you see where we are? You are now in a version of deep half guard, where I come through and hold like so. Okay. Now I have excellent control of the upper leg, but I need control of the lower leg. So I'm going to place 1 foot behind and 1 foot in front. I'm using the shoelaces of my right foot and the sole of my left foot to control his ankle. When he goes to take it out, it doesn't look like much, but it's a very tenacious grip. And I can use this to hold and control him. So let's have a look at that again. From an initial half guard position, locked in like so. We start off getting to our tight waist grip. I catch around, I get my deep scoop grip. My feet are open and I make a big revolution facing from my right all the way around to the other side. I switch my hand from one side of his hips across to the other. Then I take 1 foot, I put it behind and the other in front. So when he goes to tear his leg away from me, it's not so easy. I'm cognizant of the fact there is some danger of Kimura attacks to this arm. So I'm cognizant of keeping my arm in, hand moving, posting, etc. in response to any threat we see from there. As I lift my opponent's leg, you see it has an effect on his balance. Now I'm going to switch shoelaces, and I'm going to make his foot go all the way forward, like so. As a result, I'm able now to spin underneath my training partner's legs. I hold on, I put my knee up behind his ankle, and we come up just like so. From here, I fall down over my training partner's ankle and heel. So if he went to pull his ankle out, it's completely stuck to the mat. Now from this position, look how I take my foot and I throw it through and around underneath my training partner's opposite leg. Now all I do is a simple forward roll. I can catch his leg, I can catch his stomach, and we rotate through. As we make the rotation, our first option from here will be an inside Senkaku, where I lock. You guys know by now that if I keep my foot on his back, he can drive back towards me and cause problems. So what we want to do is make the conversion to a shoelace ashi, where my shoelaces go in front of his stomach. If he drives back into me now, that's suicide. And we'll quickly convert over into a front side position. Not just any front side position, but a front side position where my triangle is locked deep inside my opponent's hips while my feet are on the outside. That creates enormously strong connections to my opponent and very strong finishes indeed. So, from an initial half guard start, we're working from in here. Look how I set up, catch, catch. My two legs pivot all the way, facing from right around to the left. My arm comes through and catches on the opposite leg. Initially, I catch the heel. He goes to pull away from me. It won't be easy. I'm cognizant of the dangers of Kimura. I'm not naive and keeping my arm out here where he can start attacking Kimuras. He can get underhooks on me, cause all kinds of problems. So we make sure there's no opportunity for Kimuras or underhooks. Now from this position, look how we lift and switch. I use my left butterfly hook to move him forward and expose the area behind his heel. So we come up and catch. He goes to pull out, it's caught right there in my hip. Now I just cast my foot through and around to the other side. I bring one arm through, catch like a single leg. Second hand goes through. And you've got that same single leg position that we looked at earlier. We go through and lock. From here, I rotate him over, and we're in one of the strongest breaking positions in the sport. Now, let's go further with working from deep half guard and look at, instead of going with inside foot position, making the switch to outside foot position and 50-50 based attacks. So, starting situation is identical. When we work without the gi, typically we're looking to get up to the tight waist grip. We're looking to get a deep scoop grip, and then from here we're looking to make the big revolution from one side across to the other. Then we switch from our opponent's left hip, which was our initial control, to the right hip. Now we need lower leg control. So we put a shoelace in behind, we put a sole in front, and you've got the control you seek. Now you can start lifting and elevating people. I make a switch, a pass off from one foot to the other, and I use that pass off to lift the end of the lever all the way out like so and expose a straightened leg. A long straightened leg is an easy leg to attack. Now, this time, as we come up on our training partner and we get our knee up, instead of me falling in front with my hands over, in this case my left hand, I'm just going to catch here around with one leg. Okay, so I just hold right below the knee like so. Now all I do is I just fall my whole body between my training partner's legs. And my second hand goes across and makes contact underneath his opposite hamstring. So I have a hand on each hamstring. That's enough for me now just to throw my legs through and make a good catch from the 50-50 situation. Now, many ways for us to go. You can lock a basic 50-50, nothing wrong with that. Just be aware that when you do this, you can't expose your foot to your opponent and get counted. Just be aware that there's nothing to stop him from backstepping. So you should be prepared to come up to your inside shoulder and go into your breaks. Let's move to your left. Now, other alternatives, leg up, is for us to go over the top and capture our training partner's opposite leg, the secondary leg. This is actually our preference. This is the double 50 position where both of your opponent's legs are controlled at the same time. This creates very, very strong breaks and creates a situation where your opponent has to react to the control of the secondary leg, and this takes time. Because it takes time, as they go to fiddle around with your secondary leg, there's a ton of opportunities for you to go in and switch to another form of Ashigarami. Here, I've chosen the crisscross Ashi, and again, we get strong breaks. Crisscross Ashi, he does have the back step option, But unfortunately for him, it leads into an even stronger braking position. So once again, from an initial half guard type situation, we're working down like so. We come up, catch, and rotate through. We get control of our training partner's foot. He goes to pull out, it won't be easy. Now we make a simple pass off and come up. I lock over my training partner's leg. I use a simple movement around the leg. I just hold on with one arm like so. If he goes to yank his leg out, it's almost impossible. There's so much body contact, it's almost impossible. Now what we do is just roll around our training partner's leg. And as a result, we're right in place, ready to attack. Here I've chosen the basic 50-50 option. I'm aware of the fact that he can back step out. So I come up to an inside shoulder and drive into the finish. If you're looking for a stronger attack than this, you might well go with this, the crisscross ashi, which puts one foot on the outside, one foot on the inside. This is a very strong braking position, and at the same time, if he goes to convert to front side, it's equally strong from here. You also have the option of going into double 50, very, very controlling, because both legs are controlled at the same time. This creates not only a very strong braking position, but a time gap in your favor. As he goes to fiddle with your leg and move it, you have a ton of opportunities to switch on into other forms of lock. Okay? Be aware also that just because you started outside doesn't mean you have to finish outside. I can make a complete transition. As he goes to rotate through, I can make a complete transition across into inside Senkaku and drive for the finish. The big thing that we're trying to push on you here is that you can go very smoothly, pommeling your feet from one form of Ashigarami to another as you're pursuing one given lock. No one says because you started with a given Ashigarami, you have to finish with that Ashigarami. On the contrary, experience has shown that the ability to go from one Ashigarami smoothly and evenly from one to another over time as you pursue a single lock is almost always the best way to get the finish you seek. A question I'm often asked is, okay, I see you and your students doing these leg locks. You're rolling, you're inverting, you're moving around the mat. I'm 55 years old with 2 bad knees and a stiff back. I've gained a little weight, what have you. I can't do these movements. Is there anything I can do to be effective with leg locks from bottom half guard? The answer is absolutely yes. You don't have to be able to invert and spin and do all these things. These are good qualities to have. They certainly make it easier. But there is at least one highly effective entry which you can use when perhaps you don't roll and invert very well. I know when I came back from my hip replacement, I couldn't do any of those movements, but I was still able to hit this version of leg entry within a fairly short time frame after a hip replacement. The movement doesn't involve you coming up on the points of your shoulders or folding your body over itself. It's a pretty easy movement for most people to do, even into advanced age or carrying significant injuries. Let's have a look at it. It comes from a movement called a knee lever. Now, the knee lever itself will be covered extensively throughout this video. Let's have a first look at it now. Okay, from a situation where someone is here in our guard, I have my right leg over their right leg, right versus right. From here, a knee lever involves the use of my knee as a lever behind their hip to take them out of balance. It's as though it's a pushing force behind their hip, which pushes them forward. The only thing that saves them is their ability to base out. We'll see later on in this video that if we had their base of support captured, then they would fall over. But for now, all we're interested in making them do is base out with their hands. So we're not going to be capturing their wrists at this point. More likely, we'll have frames in front of them as they go to drive forward, and we'll be framing in just like so. Now, placement of my foot. The further my foot from their knee, the longer my femur bone has to be effective. So someone like me with short legs, I need my foot close to their knee. You can go foot over foot. That's a good option. You can just have your feet close. You can even have your foot in front of their knee as a blocker. The main thing is the right leg is the working leg. Make sure your right foot is close to their knee. From these situations, what we do is we take our hips ever so slightly off the mat. You're not trying to bridge here, guys, so don't think you're doing some kind of crazy bridge over your left shoulder. All you do is put tension through your leg by taking your hips ever so slightly off the mat. Now, once we do this, we just rotate our knees and point our knees to the outside. It takes our opponent out of balance. This exposes their leg and lengthens it to our attack. All I'm going to do is take my bottom knee and bring it around in front. Rotate. So that my knee goes in front of their hip. So if he came back to face me, there would be some resistance there. Now I take my hand and I go underneath his heel and hold it in place. The further my hand from my chest, the easier it is for him to escape his knee and go. So what we want to do is take our thumb and bring it down to our chest. In many cases, we'll reinforce it with the other hand. What this creates is a very small hole for his foot to go through. And what usually happens is his foot catches on our chest and bicep. So when he goes to rip his leg out, it's almost impossible. And now, with just minimal athletic ability, if any athletic ability, I just make a small turn over my training partner so my knee is on top of his hip. This makes it really easy for us to throw our legs in a variety of ways into our training partner's legs and form an Ashigarami connection. Now, if my training partner just straightens up and faces the camera, move around this way to face the camera, you will see that I have a foot in front of his thigh and a leg behind the opposite thigh. Hands back down to the floor. So when he goes to move his legs around and twist and turn and do all those things that people do to escape, he's completely shut down. This gives me more than enough time to transfer his foot from my right armpit to my left armpit. And as a result, we can go through and around and get into a very strong braking position. So let's demonstrate all of that from another angle. Okay, half guard bottom, he's in place, and I just form frames right there in front of him. I'm thinking to myself, I don't have the athleticism required to spin underneath this guy and invert, so all I want to do is get his body weight off me. So we hit a movement that anyone, regardless of age or athletic ability, can hit, a simple knee lever. Where his knee is down on the floor, I take my right foot over his knee, and then from this position, look how I just pinch my two knees together, and then from here, I knee lever to make him base out. From this position, I take my bottom knee and I bring it in front of his hip, and my bicep scoops up my training partner's shoelaces on the other side. I usually reinforce with a second hand. As he goes to yank out, it's a difficult thing to achieve. Now, I pass my legs through. First option, we go into double 50, where I take my two legs, one goes over his leg, one goes inside. So when he goes to twist, turn, move out, back step, and do all those things that people do, it's very, very tough. In the time available, we transfer the foot across and go into a heel hook. Now, in that amount of time, an experienced opponent might well be able to push on my foot and clear it off. If you see that happening, don't be intimidated. Just take your foot and lock it to his buttocks so that when he goes into the predictable back step, you just go into another braking position, the crisscross ashi. And then from here, we bring our hips up and over our training partner's knee and drive forward into a very strong finish. From another angle. Opponent's in front of us, drives forward. We make a good frame. From here, we go into the classic knee lever. I just bring my knee up, rotate, and force him over to the side and create an extended leg. I don't want him coming back towards me, so my bottom knee comes through and locks right there in front of the hip, forms an effective wedge in front of his body. Now, the main danger is he will flee the mat. So I come through and lock. Our first option from here as we turn around is to cover the secondary leg and then pass my leg through like so. So the secondary leg is trapped from both in front and behind. And as a result, we've got more than enough time to pass the foot across my center line from my right shoulder to my left armpit and lock it in place. If you get the break, congratulations, it's over. If your opponent is very resolute, takes your foot, just touch your foot to his buttocks. Okay, he can try and push it as much as he wants. He'll never stop you doing that. Now he's got to go into his back step. But when he does, he goes right into a different form of Ashigarami. In this case, it's the crisscross Ashi. And then from here, we just drive forward with our pelvis and we get the finish we seek. Okay, so that's one form of 50-50. Now you've got to learn the others. Same scenario. Remember, guys, the chances of you finishing successfully with the leg lock go up dramatically when you can play different Ashigaramis against each other. Just because an Ashigarami fails doesn't mean the leg lock fails. There's a big difference, okay? You can fail with 3 different Ashigaramis in a row and win on the 4th and still get to your leg lock. The leg lock's here, the Ashigaramis are over here. 2 different things. One is for control, one's for finishing. Okay, so be prepared to swim through the varieties of Ashigarami over time to get what you really want at the end of the day, which is the heel hook itself. So here we are, we're playing down on the floor. He comes driving in towards me and we go into the least athletic but highly effective sweeping movement from half guard, the knee lever. We just go through and send him over to the side and create the extended leg that we're always looking for. Now I need to preserve the extension by putting our knee in front just like so. As always, we go through and capture. This time, as I turn around my training partner's leg, instead of going into double 50, like so, we're going to go into the classic 50-50, where I have my foot here in front, lock, and I get a simple triangle in front of my training partner's legs. Okay? Now, the virtue of this is that because my knees are pointed down towards the floor, it's a very strong connection to my opponent's hips. When he goes to pull away from me and drag his body out, you feel like you're locked on like a husky onto its toboggan. Now, in these situations, we're going to get time to lock through, and it's a very strong finishing position from the back. The great deficiency of this move is that it does nothing to stop my opponent from backstepping. And if he successfully backsteps, there's a good chance he can come up and attack my exposed hands. He can get to my head and do all kinds of things, get to my elbow, and that really going to screw things up. So when we're in these situations, if I see my training partner backstep and I'm in a conventional 50-50 backside, I want to make sure I go to my shoulder. I don't want to go to my back. He backsteps flat on my back. It's very easy for him to bypass my knee and get on the attack. So when I see him backstepping, I want to make a clean revolution up onto my inside shoulder. I can't be naive and leave him, my heel, to be attacked. I want to make sure that I maintain some form of Senkaku. When he goes to attack my heel, it's very difficult from here. My weight is right over his hips, and we lock up our hands, and when we drive forward, we get a very strong break. Okay? So be aware that if we're going to go for the basic 50-50 situation, it's very, very important from there that we protect our feet by keeping our feet close together, preferably in some variation of Senkaku or triangle. And we want to go down to our inside shoulder so we don't expose our hands, elbow, or head to an opponent. Now, let's look at the third of these options. This one is an interesting mix of both inside and outside control. Okay. We're an older athlete, maybe we're a little less athletic than our opponent, and he's driving forward on us, and we get to the classic knee lever situation. From here, we send him over, we create the extended leg. We bring the bottom knee through, and things are looking good from here. This time, when we go through on our training partner, we're going to bring our foot over, and what I want you to do is pass one foot over his buttocks, just like so. Then crisscross your legs and send them through like so. Okay? So I have one foot on the outside, one foot on the inside. When he goes to flee the mat, it's very, very difficult. And it's very easy for us now to go through and get to our lock. Now, the beauty of this lock is it gives tremendous control of your opponent's hips from both inside and outside position. So when he tries to drag his knee through our knee line, it's exceptionally difficult. What many opponents will do now is flip over to try and go front side, but it's just as robust on this side as it is on the other. When he tries to scoot back on his hips, it's very, very difficult, and it's a very strong breaking position for the win. So between all of those options, you're going to have a lot of success working from the knee lever into the heel hook. People commonly think that leg locks from half guard are best done, or can only be done rather, from situations where there's space between your chest and their chest. It's natural that they should think this, because most of the best entries into leg locks involve some form of shield with knees or frames that creates a little bit of space for you to spin into and invert and get into your opponent's legs. But don't think that you can't be very effective entering into leg locks when your opponent is chest to chest, even when they have situations that most people believe would be dominant. Okay, so for example, most people, and I believe correctly, would assume that if someone has an underhook and a crossface and are putting downward pressure on you, that they have the dominant position from here. Okay, there's good reasons for thinking this. But even from unpromising looking situations like this, you can start to get into leg locks. It's all about just creating a little space. One of the best ways for us to create space is with a knee lever that forces our opponent to take a back step. How does this work? Well, I'm going to prevent my opponent from basing out with his right arm. I do this by putting my elbow on top of his elbow and my hand on their lat muscle. And as a result, when I go to hit my knee lever, the only way they can base out is to use this leg. So I hit a quick knee lever that forces them into a back step to preserve their balance. Then from here, I take my knee and I bring it up towards my own chest. As a result, when my opponent comes back in towards me, there's going to be a ton of space for us to get our two legs on the inside. And as a result, from here, it's going to be very easy for me to bring my hand in front and use this thumb post in the armpit and this hand here to create an off balance off the opposite shoulder. Now, this is a happy marriage of the fact that there's not many happy marriages out there, so this is a rare example. There's a movement to my left and my opponent had to come back to my right. So I'm taking advantage of the fact that he's coming back to my right to move him in the same direction that he's going. So I just get my two hands in towards my training partner's shoulders, and now my two butterfly hooks start that action of moving my opponent out in that direction. Now my hand goes through underneath my training partner, and you've got a ton of space now. Put your hand out. Mm-hmm. We've got a ton of space now to put my hand through and start looking for my single leg attack. So my hand goes inside, and then from here I push off my bottom foot, and I focus on getting to this position here. Now guys, there's a detail here which is of the utmost importance for your leg locking from this position. This is my right knee wants to go behind his, like so. So look how when I punch in, my whole purpose is to knock him forwards and get my knee right behind his, like a true Kani Basami. I'm pulling down with my arm and pushing with my knee, so there's a fantastically strong connection. So when he goes to yank out, it's locked in place, and that's going to make for a very good entry into my training partner's heel. You got a ton of different options now. You can go for variations of inside Senkaku. You can go for the squad favorite, crisscross ashi. Or you can cast your legs straight through into double 50 or into a traditional 50-50 like so. All of them are great options, okay? So essentially what we're doing here, guys, is we're tying together the idea of a knee lever to create space with a single leg butterfly entrance, which is, all things considered, my overall favorite method of entering into the legs from bottom position. There's a ton of good ways to do it, but that's in many ways the most robust across a wide array of circumstances. So let's have a look at all of this again from different angles. Okay, we've got the guy on top of us. And he's done a good job of getting an underhook and a crossface. We've done a pretty good job of bringing our foot up to the knee, and we've noticed that the knee is down on the floor. So from here, I pinch my two knees together. He can't base out with his right arm because I've trapped it. I'm not hooking around or anything crazy like that. I just put my hand on the lat muscle and my elbow traps his arm in place. Now I hit a knee level by taking my ass just an inch or two off the floor and pointing my knees and forcing him into a strong back step action. Now I bring my knee up here into my chest. As he comes back, watch my bottom leg, it curls back, so you've got butterfly hooks. Now my second hand goes through and across my training partner and I double thumb post in the armpit so that I can start an action of lifting my opponent in the same direction he came back towards. Now I come through and my whole intention is to get my right knee in behind his knee. Look how I come in elbow deep on the leg and catch. So when he goes to pull away, there's such a tight connection that it's very, very difficult indeed to pull away. As we lock up, we've got a good bite on the heel. I look at my opponent's reaction. If he backsteps right from here, I would just stay with the inside Senkaku for the break. If I felt my opponent was trying to pull away from me, I might well be inclined to take my foot and pass through. If I felt my opponent was pushing back into me, then I would absolutely, definitely pass through like so. Okay, for reasons that I'll explain in 1 minute. If I feel my opponent was attempting a back step, I might well step over the second leg and go double 50. So when he tries to back step, it's very, very difficult. If I felt my opponent was kicking out and coming over, I might well go to one of my favorite positions, 50-50, down on an inside shoulder. And from here, driving forward for strong finishes, okay? Those are all great options, depending upon what you see unfolding in front of you. So once again, we've got an opponent here in front of us. He's done a good job of going through and getting to what most people consider dominant position. We come in, we get elbow over elbow, and we hit that good knee lever out to the side, forcing him into a big back step. Now, hand goes in, knee comes up. He goes to recover, and my 2 feet come in as butterfly hooks. My hand fights across, and my 2 thumbs go right into his armpit. So you've got a double thumb post. Now your whole thing is to lift him not so much out to the side as over your right shoulder, like so. And it's from this position that we catch and spin. From this inversion, my knee comes up over his knee. So when he goes to flee, you've got a great bite. From this position, the biggest danger we face, this is the point that I raised earlier, is an opponent will push back into us. The great problem, the great deficiency of inside Senkaku and backside finishes, it's a great way to finish frontside. When you're backside, I need an ability to push into the back of his leg, preferably close to the knee. That's very important, so I'm going to say it again. In any backside finish, one of the most important prerequisites of success is that I can push into the back of his leg, preferably close to the knee. Inside Senkaku does not do a good job of this. So when my opponent pushes back, you can see his leg straightens, and I don't really have much ability to push back into him. That's when putting my legs through makes a big, big difference. The crisscross ashi, when he goes to push back into me, makes it very easy for me to push right back into him. I'm pushing into his one leg with the strength of 2 of mine. And as a result, when he tries hard to push back in, go, he'll never do it. And from here, the breaks are fantastically strong. You can do similar things with any version of 50-50. Okay? He goes to push back into me. I'm pushing right into the back of his leg, close to the knee. The break is there. Even the good old-fashioned 50-50 like so does a good job of it. Okay? Inside Senkaku does a poor job of it. He goes to push back in. I got nothing to push with. It makes my knees face the ceiling. And from there, I'm lost. But when we go through here, he goes to push forward, I can point my knees at the floor and completely shut him down. Now, one good thing about Inside Senkaku, you can take your feet from the back to the front. He goes to push in. You can corkscrew him and convert it from backside, which is not very good for Inside Senkaku, to front side, which is extremely good for Inside Senkaku. And from here, get into your breaks. One more time. Guys on top of us, he's got good position. We go through, we hit that initial knee lever that forces him into a back step. I bring my knee to my chest. He comes back towards me. Now I've got 2 feet on the inside. As we wrestle in this position, I bring my hand through. I start that action of lifting and tilting, bringing him over to the side. Now my hand goes across, and there's that good bite on our training partner's leg. As we go through and get our grip, what we really want here is the ability to push back into his legs. So he tries to come back. Crisscross Hashi does exactly that. Now he can do whatever he wants to push back in, won't do him any good at all. And from here, you've got fantastic braking pressure. Now, we're going to start the ball rolling with technique from half guard, and I'm going to start with an observation, which I believe can be of great importance to your development in your half guard game. I'm sure that many of you have noticed when you come to watch my students compete, when they work from half guard, almost always the first thrust of their attack is towards their opponent's legs. This is a deliberate policy on my part. I always push my students, when you're working from half guard bottom, make your first attacks, your first threat towards your opponent's legs. This stands in unison with our approach from guard position in general. For those of you who saw the New Wave Jiu-Jitsu guard videos, you'll remember that leg attacks were the foundation of my entire approach to guard game. Not only is it the foundation of my approach to guard game in general, it's also the foundation of my approach to half guard. And as I said, you will always see my students, when they start off in half guard, will start by attacking the legs. You've got to ask yourself, why? What's so special about the legs? Well, the first reason is availability. Your opponent's legs are always available to attack from any form of guard, including half guard. It doesn't matter whether my opponent is chest to chest, or I'm managing distance with a knee shield or any other form of guard, there's always leg attacks in there. It is almost impossible for an opponent to hide his legs from your attack when you're in any form of half guard situation, or indeed any form of guard situation. Because the legs are so readily available, it makes sense to make them the initial focus of your attacks. If they can't hide the legs, they're always there, then if you get good at attacking the legs, you've always got a target to shoot at. This stands in distinction to submission like triangles, for example. The triangle can be done from half guard, but it has to, the circumstances that would make it possible have to be very carefully managed. It's not something you can just go straight to under all circumstances. So that's why I favor leg attacks right from the start. Make that your primary focus. The second reason is, once you get really strong at leg attacks from half guard, it puts your opponent in a very reactive mindset. When they come into your half guard and they've felt the danger of your leg attacks, they're much more worried about your leg attacks than they are worried about passing your guard. So mentally, they're all thinking, okay, where's the next leg attack coming from? And they're more concerned about what you're doing to them than what you are doing, what they are doing to you. This is a very, very big advantage in any kind of combat sport. When the other guy's more worried about you than you are about him, this is a wonderful, wonderful state of affairs for you. So by having strong leg attacks, they're always available. You've always got a target to shoot at. It creates a mental situation where you're proactive and your opponent is reactive. These are huge advantages. Thirdly, when you get strong at leg attacks, many of your opponents will adopt a posture which facilitates defending leg attacks. Often this involves sitting back to their buttocks. Why? Because when they sit back to their buttocks, they can use their legs in unison and get one leg defend the other. Okay, so if my right leg is under attack and I sit on my buttocks, I can use my left leg to come through and defend. But this comes at a price. When you commit your buttocks to the ground, it's very easy for the person who was playing half guard to come up and score a reversal. So many of these standard defensive maneuvers to leg locks put your opponent in a position where it's very easy to score reversal points. By creating that constant threat on the legs, where opponents have to either go into a reactive mindset where they're not really engaging with you, or they're putting themselves in compromised positions and stances and postures where you can score reversals, you start to get a kind of double attack, where you either get the leg submission, or if they go in to defend themselves, you get the sweep points and get up on top of them. Considerations like this make leg attacks the foundation of my half guard bottom game. You will often see my students exploit this in competition, where they go in hard and fast for initial leg attacks that create a nervousness in their opponent who are now afraid to engage, or they fall down into compromised postures and body positions where my students can scramble up on top of them. Used in this way, leg locks can become the foundation of your half guard game too. Now, we've been through a lot of half guard material, and almost all the material we've seen so far involved chest-to-chest situations where our opponent's hips and chest face down towards the floor. There's a reason why, because that is the more popular and all-round one of the more effective half guard top positions. Nonetheless, many opponents favor the idea of going into a sit-out, where their chest, instead of facing directly down towards your chest, will face back towards your hips, and they will sit down on a hip. This has some very good effects for the person on top and makes it a popular position among many half guard passers, either as a passing position in itself or just as a temporary holding position, and they switch back and forth from one position to another. Either way, if you're going to call yourself a master of half guard, you've got to learn how to deal effectively with this situation. So let's have a look at it right now. Okay. Typically, when we're working from bottom half guard, the most statistically common situation is one where my opponent is chest to chest. Typically, they're looking to work and control us with a cross face. Now, if we had a gi on, my opponent could sit out towards my hips. Sit out. Like so. And use my gi to take his left hand, go underneath my armpit, grab a hold of the gi, and apply tremendous cross-face pressure through the gi. But when he works without a gi, and he doesn't have the lapels to work with, it's not a particularly, it's not wrong, but it's not a particularly devastating position to sit out in the manner he is now with a conventional cross-face on. Okay, the cross-face doesn't put much pressure on me at all without the benefit of the jacket. So typically when we work without a gi, people will take their arm across and then they will sit out. They have two excellent choices. They can sit out with a reverse crossface with their arm across here by the ear, or they can sit out into a reverse underhook here. There's pros and cons to both. The reverse underhook is very good insofar as if I turn into my opponent, I will expose my back. So people who favor attacking the back will often favor this position. Okay, so as I go to turn into my opponent, you'll see increasing amounts of back exposure. And if he can slide his right knee along my back, he can start to expose my back and go to work. Okay, so that's the upshot of the upside of my opponent sitting out, taking the reverse underhook. Other people favor the reverse crossface. The great virtue of this is it offers tremendous head control. I can't move my head around freely. It's blocked. It's wedged in place by his tricep. Okay? It doesn't generate so much back exposure, but it does give excellent head control. And at the same time, it does generate arm exposure. If I'm naive and start putting my arm here and he can start going into Kimura, he can start causing a lot of problems for me in this position. Okay, so it gives excellent head control and opens up the possibility of arm exposure. Here, with the reverse underhook, it generates a lot of back exposure if I turn into my opponent. As long as I'm flat on my back, there's no back exposure, but most of the defensive movements from half guard involve turning into people. And that's exactly when from here, it generates considerable back exposure and enables my opponent to turn into me. Okay, so what should we be looking to do when someone elects to sit through on us? Okay, let's have a look from this position. First things you'll notice when someone elects to sit through, regardless of which one they use, this knee will inevitably come off the floor. That's just part of the deal. Okay, now pros and cons. Things like a simple knee lever now become impossible because the knee's not on the floor. Okay, don't worry, we'll come back to that. It's an interesting question. They do sacrifice a little bit of stability in a backwards direction. Not as much as many people have you believe, but there is some sacrifice here. Okay, so any movement they make where they sit down on the hip means that they're lacking a little bit of base in a backwards direction. Okay, so that's the downside of doing what they've done. So let's have a look at a situation. Just maneuver so your buttocks face the camera. Okay, someone's in here, chest to chest. If I see my opponent start to bring his crossface across the other side, it's no secret what's coming next. It doesn't make any sense for him to keep his elbow on this side and stay on his knees. Okay, that opens up a very, very simple movement where I just take a thumb post on my training partner's tricep, and then from here, it's an easy thing for me just to give a little bridge and turn over to my side and start posting on my training partner's body out like so. That's a very easy thing to do now. And as a result, we can go right into leg lock action, or we can just bring our legs in, presumably you're going to be facing me. And from here, just bring our legs back in and recover guard very, very easily. Okay, so if he's going to bring his crossface from one side to the other, from crossface to reverse crossface, it makes sense for him to sit through. So from here, whenever I see my opponent bring the arm across, there's a time gap where it goes across my head. Okay, so what I often do is keep, especially if I know someone favors sit-throughs, is I will keep my hand posted like so. When I see my opponent start the action of sitting through and bringing the arm across, there's going to be a perfect time for me now just to take my hand and come up onto my shoulder. And as a result, his center of gravity goes up and off my body. That creates the perfect time for me to bring my bottom knee right back into play. Once my knees pinch around my opponent, you have the choice between bringing your foot across in front and going for outside heel hooks, or bringing your arm through underneath and bringing the forward leg around the corner and going across into inside heel hooks. And from here, going into our break. In general, we favor the inside heel hook over the outside, and so this would be the more likely option we would take. So once again, starting off like so. I thumb post right in here. So at the second my opponent goes into a sit through, you know what he wants to do. If the arm goes across, I just bridge and turn, performing something between a bridge and a shrug. Then from this position, I just bring my knee up and pinch my legs around. So when he comes back to turn and face me, there's an obstruction there. I dig my hand through and around, foot goes in front, second leg goes around, and we find ourselves in the perfect position to counter. Now, what if you don't like leg locks as an option and you just want to engage in a more conservative kind of approach? Again, I thumb post. When I see my opponent go into the turn, we just hit a reverse shrug. And you find now your bottom knee can come inside. So my knee was behind him. I just pummel it through and bring my knee inside. As my opponent comes back to face me, he comes back onto our knees. And as a result, we're right in position to go back into butterfly guard. So here we are, half guard bottom. My opponent is on top. I know he favors the sit through, so I thumb post just like so. As he goes across, you know what he wants to do. He wants to prepare to sit through. Just bridge through like so. Instead of bringing my bottom knee in front, I bring my top knee in front. So as he comes back in to face us, my 2 feet go in, and we're in perfect position now to attack from butterfly guard. So a simple thumb post, which takes advantage of our opponent's switch from crossface to reverse crossface, is the first and most conservative response to our opponent starting to sit through. Now we're looking at the potentially tricky situation where the man on top sits through on us, changes the orientation of his hips, and any change in orientation of the body requires a different response on our part. We've got to know how to deal with this. Let's look at a move which we've used throughout this video, the knee lever. Now you're probably thinking this is curious because knee levers apparently only work when the knee is on the floor. So the whole idea of a sit out is that the knee comes off the floor. How does this work? Let's have a look at it right now. Okay. Classic knee lever situation. My opponent's knee is on the floor, his chest is square to me, and this is the perfect time for us to hit a good knee lever that tilts our man over. If my opponent takes the arm across and sits through, knee levers shouldn't work from here. In fact, they should actually backfire pretty badly because my opponent's knee is now higher than my hips. So any post on my knee creates situations where he can start to walk my knees this way, drive his knee towards the mounted position, and now he's in a 3/4 mount, ready to attack. So what should I be looking to do here? What I can't do is let my opponent's knee get higher than my hips. Because the moment the knees get higher than the hips, any push on his part on my knee creates an instant situation where it can cut through towards the mounted position. Okay? So what we always want to make sure, back down, when our opponent switches across and sits through, we always want to make sure our knees are on top of his knee, here. If my knee is below his knee, nothing good comes out of this. It means his knee is higher than my hips, and now he can start to threaten the mount. Once he threatens the mount, it's pretty easy for him to come back, underhook, and now start to threaten side control on this side. Like so, okay? So there's a game going on here. The game is the game for height advantage. He's looking to get his knee higher than my hips. And by sitting out, that's exactly what he does. If I stay with my hips on the floor, it's very easy for him to threaten one direction and pass in the other. So, whenever I see my opponent go over the top, hit a crossface, and sit out, I make sure, initially at least, I keep my knee on top of his knee. His whole game now is going to be to post on the knee and push it below his. Okay? As I do this, I've got to be careful. If he goes to post on my knee and I go to take it off, he can go Kimura and cause new problems for me. So I can't be naive here. When I see my opponent sit out, he comes across, he sits out, I first focus on getting my knee above his. Now, my first movement is to take his knee back down to the mat. How do I do this? I take my two knees, I pinch them together, and I just point them over in this direction. It's a weird looking knee lever. Normally knee levers are done with your feet on the floor, not this one. I just pinch my two knees together, make a strong resistant body, and then from here I just point my knees over and his hips follow. As soon as he gets there, I post on my training pit on his hips and switch them. Now I'm in the perfect position to go in on the attack. I take my 2 feet, lock over his, I hit that same knee lever that off bounces our opponent and takes him over to the side. From here, we go in on our training partner and we start that action of thumb posting and coming up to an elbow like so. My whole game from here is to get underneath my training partner's arm. As he comes back with his wisdom, you're in a situation where you have the same head height He has the advantage in hip height, but you're in a position where you can heist, and you have this underhook. As we both go to scramble up together, you find yourself in a situation where you can always get in on your training partner's ribs and hips and lock in like so. As he gets to his whizzer, you're so far behind him that he has a back whizzer. Okay, that's not really what he needs. A front whizzer to hold me off here. I just put my outside leg up, then I walk around to the other side, and I've got what I want. Back position, back exposure, and we're ready to play. I'm sure you guys remember from earlier in the video the difference between a front whizzer and a back whizzer. Let's quickly go over that now. If I have a tight waist on my opponent, his hand is in front, hands on the floor. From this situation, it's hard for me to go around behind him because he's got that whizzer in front of me. But if I have come up from bottom position and thrown my lat muscle to his lat muscle, now his whizzer is a back whizzer. It's behind my shoulder. He can do whatever he wants. Once I lock in here, I just walk to the other side and I beat his whizzer every time and get to my opponent's back. So let's have a look at that again. My opponent goes to sit out. I make sure I keep my knee up above his knee so that I can lift my hips off the floor. That puts weight on his leg, and then just point my knees over the other way. From here, we pull him back down, foot goes in, second foot goes in, I hit my knee lever. I come up into my training partner, building up to my base. Even as I come up, I get into that position that we see. My hand going to his belly button. Don't be satisfied with this. Your thumb in front of his belly button. Now, when we go to scramble for top position, okay, when my hands lock, we go together. Go. You win every time. Not because I'm any good, but just because I had an unfair advantage. Okay? It's like winning a race where you started far ahead of the other person. It's not because you're faster, it's because you started earlier. Okay? You had an advantage at the start. So, here we are. I see my opponent's arm come over. I see him go to sit out. I keep top knee position. From top knee position, I take my hips off the floor, get his knee back down towards the mat. From here, he goes to face me, obviously. And from this situation, we go over the top with a knee lever and force him out to the side. We get that hand posting up on our training partner so we can come up to an elbow. From this position, we're underneath him. Look how I heist. And I turn my hips in and my thumb comes to his belly button. And as a result, we're behind our opponent with considerable advantage. This is an excellent way to use a double knee lever to get behind an opponent out of half guard. The beauty of sitting out from the point of view of your opponent is that it can potentially give them an advantage in the height of their knee over your hip. And that will greatly facilitate your ability to go over either one of your opponent's hips, either into the mounted position or to either side. So let's have a look at how we might counter this with butterfly hooks. When my opponent's flat on his knees, chest to chest, he has no real advantage in knee height. But the minute he goes into a sit out and goes through, he has a substantial advantage. His knee is now higher than my hips, so he can immediately threaten to drive across and cause problems for me. He can immediately drive across, change his orientation, and then pass out in this direction. So that advantage in knee height really does translate into good results on the mat. I can't just accept this. When my opponent makes the movement across and starts to go up high, it's important for me that I keep my knee above his knee. Now there's going to be a battle. He's going to use the hand on the hip and the elbow to clear the knee off, or the hand on the knee like so to clear it off. If he uses the hand, he's a little naive perhaps, because it's very easy for me to use my backhand to go through and capture it. Okay, now when he goes to work, difficult. And very easy for me now to use my own legs. Look how I stand on his Achilles tendon. I'm up here above his knee, I stand on the Achilles tendon, and I put my foot in behind my training partner, and I start the action of lifting across his body. It's hard for him to counter because I'm controlling his arm on the other side. And as a result, it's an easy thing for us now to come up and control our training partner's head. Now he finds himself in a truly wretched situation where his own arm is badly caught. It's important for us now that we get our head down to the mat. He can recover his arm position from here and come back in. So it's important that I get my head down to the floor. So when he goes to recover arm position, it's all stuck. Now it's an easy thing for us to start driving across our training partner's body and into potentially winning positions. So once again, we have an opponent here in front of us. He elects to sit out. We start by keeping our knee up above his knee. If he's naive and uses his hand, then I go in behind and capture. He goes to yank it out. It's not so easy. Now, I stand on his Achilles tendon, feed the leg around, and lift and elevate. From here, I go across and get to that initial cross face. From here, my head comes down towards the floor. He goes to pull his arm free. It's not so easy from there. And as a result, we're in perfect position now to tie up our training partner and potentially go in for controls and finishes. Now, an obvious question is, well, what if my opponent's not naive? He doesn't use his hand, he uses the hand properly on the hip and uses the elbow. This is what he perhaps should be doing. So, he goes across, sits out, and from here uses the hand on the elbow and separates the knee away. Okay, so now I can't really get inside and hit the previous move. What do I do under these circumstances? Well, I can't be naive and have my hand fishing around here. Then he snatches my wrist, goes Kimura, and now you're in trouble. Okay, so I've got to keep my hand up here to lessen the arm exposure. Problem is, now there's nothing stopping him from getting the elbow escape to work, escaping his knee, and going on the attack. Okay, so from these situations, watch my bottom foot. I keep my left knee on top. As he goes to clear my top knee off, I find his Achilles tendon. Even as he clears my knee off now, my foot goes in underneath him as a hook. Now from here, he tries to hold his base, and I start that lifting action in behind. Okay, once his shoulders go behind his hips, I just push off the floor. If my feet are off the floor, we both stalemate. He tries to get back up, I try to get up to stalemate. But when I use the floor, we go together, go. From here, you'll always be able to push off. Worst case scenario, your opponent's way bigger than you and just uses his superior weight and strength to come back up on top. The good news is, you just keep lifting him out to the side and your knee comes in. You got back exposure. Off that kind of back exposure, we can send them right back with sumigaeshi into a good finishing position. So once again, we have an opponent who elects to sit out. Biggest concern, him getting top knee position. That's a big advantage for him. I can't accept that. If he's smart, he uses the hand and the elbow, like an elbow escape. If he's naive and he uses the hand, you can catch it behind. From here, I can't expose my arm to a Kimura. Gotta be careful to keep it safe. From this position, as he goes to take my knee off, look how I find his Achilles tendon. I take my butterfly hook and hook it inside. Even if he went to kick out now, it'd be difficult. And I track my opponent's knee. If he goes to back step out, I track it. I don't just stay here static. He kicks out, goes across side, and pins. Let's make sure this is a sticky hook. If he moves his leg back, I follow. Now, if he tries to drive forward, he's driving forward into that butterfly hook. It's not an easy thing to do. From here, I don't want him circling his arm out. I want to take my forehead straight down to the mat. He goes to circle out. It's tough. From situations like this, we can start the action of locking up. From here, We come out to the side and find ourselves in very, very good finishing positions. So, from here, he goes over the top, sits out. I do my best to keep top knee position long enough that from here I can find his Achilles tendon and get my foot inside. As he tries to escape his leg, I make sure I'm ready to follow it at a moment's notice. If he keeps weight on me, from here, look how I use my foot to sweep in the direction where he has very little base. I just lift, cut, and maneuver the head. Pushing off the floor makes for a good movement. If he does circle out, then I just focus on going past the knees on the other side. Okay? The main thing is we destabilize the guy going backwards. Now, I think it's fair to say that would be a best case scenario. I know what you're thinking. Thinking, man, in my life, best case scenarios only come by once a month. Show me some scenarios that are okay, but not as good as that. Don't worry. If you don't knock them all the way over, at least you create space. And that's a positive thing by itself. So, he goes to sit out. From here, battle for top knee position. He's starting to win it. Okay, you can feel it starting to come off. We can't stay here forever. We go in, we get that inside foot position. I give a good lift and I feel him coming back. If I feel him coming back, I want to focus on an elbow escape on the other side. So as I lose the battle for top position, I win the battle for back position. He comes back with his weight, I lift, I get my elbow inside his hip, and then I just lift, and you got your knee on the outside. Once the knee goes on the outside, it's a pretty easy thing to take him up into the side and start getting top position. Let's have a look at that from another angle. So he sits out. We're interested in top knee position. He's interested in getting his knee on top of mine. There's a battle going on. From here, I capture, foot goes in. I try hard to lift him over, and he comes back strong. My elbow goes inside, lift, elbow escape, and from here, so many ways to go. From another angle. He goes over, sits out. He's starting to win the battle for top knee position. Look how I catch. Foot goes in and hooks. I try hard to take him in the direction where he has no base. He goes to recover. As he comes back up, my elbow ticks inside position. He can put all his weight on me. Once my knee goes inside, he floats. And then from this position, so many ways to go. He goes to pull away. It's difficult. Okay. Now, what if even that doesn't work? What if this guy is so much bigger than you? You're like, dude, there's no way I'm going to be able to make this guy float over the top of me. It's twice my weight. What do I do now? Okay, he goes across, sits out. He's starting to win the battle for top knee position. We catch the Achilles tendon. We get the foot inside. Well, one thing is true. He never really has any base in this direction. So our whole thing is always off balance in that direction. Now, as I see my training partner go in to try and recover, and I feel like he's coming up on top, and he's just too damn heavy. Okay? Whenever we see that, I'm sure you can guess this, we just thumb post and move him out in the opposite direction. From here, I go either top knee, if you like outside heel hooks, or bottom knee, if you like inside heel hooks. And from here we go back into leg locks. So once again, action, reaction now. Big heavy guy on top, sits out. We come down, we catch the Achilles tendon, get the butterfly hook, we lift, and we get flattened. From here, look how I just lift. I use the butterfly hook to go around the corner. From here, around we go, and back into business. So those are some practical ways to use the butterfly hook to get up and out from a challenging situation where your opponent sits out on you. Now, we've looked at a bunch of different aspects of an opponent's sit out in a half guard. Let's look at one of my favorite ways of countering any form of sit out. This is to switch our upper body grips and focus on the upper body grips rather than what we're doing with our lower body, and get to our own reverse underhook and work from there. Okay, let's look first at the problem. We're in half guard. Our opponent elects to bring his arm across. Now, so far we've been looking at reverse cross faces. The other option he has is to go here to a reverse underhook. So his arm is underneath my arm, but it's not a conventional underhook. Normally, an underhook is his right arm versus my left. Now it's his left versus my left. This has the advantage that he can maintain a sit-out position, and if I turn into him, I expose my back. And if he knows what he's doing, he can take advantage of that. So, whenever someone goes to make the transition across the body, one thing we can do is be disciplined with our hand position here. If my arms are floating around in the breeze and you're holding something like so, then when they go to switch across, there's not much you can do with your arms. Okay, you can't pommel effectively when your elbows are extended away from your body. When it's time to pommel effectively, what I want is my elbows as close to my body as possible. So a good trick for us to make sure we do this is to take our two hands and bring them very close together inside my opponent's shoulder. This is surprisingly easy to do, even when my opponent has what seems like a very tight cross face. So as he comes in here, it's not so difficult for us to use mild off balances to go in and get our hands in good position. Okay, it's not so difficult for us to turn and bridge into an opponent and get a hand inside. And once one hand goes inside, it's always pretty easy to get the other one in. Now, whenever my opponent goes to make a switch now, because my hands are in the inside position, even as he goes to make the switch, it's really easy for us to come in and make our own switch and put our hand here on his back. So as he goes to sit out, you find yourself in a situation, you keep your knee above his, and you have a framing arm in a rather unusual position. On his lower back, elbows on the upper back, hands on the lower back. Now, from here, your opponent has a definite goal, and that's to free his knee and work from this position. You have a definite goal, which is to keep your knee above his. From here, we're going to shimmy our body out, and we're going to get a height advantage over our opponent. I'm going to take my elbow and bring it back behind me. And as a result, I can build up to an elbow. Once I build up to an elbow like this, even if my opponent did take my knee off his knee and step away to the side, he wouldn't pass my guard because my shoulders aren't on the mat. If I have my shoulders on the mat and my opponent steps out and he holds for 3 seconds, that's a pin. He gets points for passing my guard. But there's no pin when I come up to my elbow. He can step out now and it doesn't count for anything because my shoulders aren't on the mat. Because my shoulders aren't on the mat, it's very easy for me to start planting a foot and heisting my hips into him. I just bump him with my hips. And as a result, I can now take my knee and go behind him with my knee. Once I get my knee behind his, that's back exposure. I've got a knee on each side of his body. This is a dangerous, dangerous situation for my opponent. He's going to want to turn back in and face me. You're going to want to catch him at the hip. And as he goes to turn back in and face you, you want to stay behind your opponent. If my head is back, he can bring his arm between us. Bring your arm between us. Now, that's not the end of the world, but it's still in a dangerous situation because as he turns to face us, he's going to come right into sumigashi. Okay? But it's better than getting your back taken. So, when we start off in this position, I don't want my elbows around my opponent. That gives me no ability to pommel. What we want is our hands inside. So that even as he goes to turn across, you'll need to move your arm. My arm goes through here. Now, I bring my hand down towards my training partner's back. I've got to be careful about just giving him easy access to palming his leg out while my shoulders are on the floor. You can do tricks. You can place a foot right in front and catch his leg so he goes to palm him out. It's not so easy. And this creates situations where you can start moving and coming up to an elbow. Once your elbow's off the floor, you don't have to worry about him backstepping. There's no pin from here. Even if he stood over and got mounted on me now, my knee beats him, mounted. My knee beats him, and you still got back exposure. Okay, and most importantly, your shoulders aren't on the mat. Because I had my arm over his, in a situation like so, it's usually pretty easy for us to win the various scrambles that come out of this position. So once again, we've got an opponent on top of us. We do a good job of remaining disciplined with our hand position, so that when an opponent goes to bring his hand across, you will automatically get your own reverse underhook on him. Okay, he thought he was going to get the reverse underhook on you. You got it on him. Interestingly, this will work regardless of what his intentions are. He could want to get a crossface, a reverse crossface, or a reverse underhook. It wouldn't matter, because you're in control of where the arms end up. Let's say I had this position and he went for a reverse crossface. Didn't matter. He ended up with what I wanted, not what he wanted. Now, from this situation, we're always looking to come up to an elbow. Move around. If you feel you're kind of stuck underneath your opponent and it's hell to get up, a little trick which I often employ is I just pommel my foot around in front of my training partner's foot. Okay, so I just go foot to foot, just like so. He goes to kick out. It's not so easy. It means I can move his leg a little further away, and it facilitates getting up. Once I get up, I don't really care too much what he does with his legs at this point. He could step right over my legs and what he thinks is mount. Okay, my shoulders still aren't on the mat. And it's easy for us now to bring that knee out and escape. I can do this because my shoulders are not pinned to the mat and I have height, so my hips move easily. If he steps out to side control, it means very little. If he squares his hips up in side control, again, you've got that ability to work with the height of your arm over his. I don't want him stepping around this knee. That's not good. The other knee. That's not good. Okay, but even if you did get around my knee, you have that ability to heist and get up. And that's what makes all the difference. Okay, in these scramble situations, height of head and hips is everything. Okay, and so many ways to go in here and work effectively in the scramble. Thankfully, you won't have to use those options very much, because typically it's easier for you to move in these circumstances than him, because you have less distance to traverse. So, from a situation where he's on top, we're going to start by finagling a hand inside. Once one hand goes inside, it's easy to get the other. Now, I've got my hands in good position. I see him go across. It's easy for us now to come up and get to this position. Hand on the lower back, elbow on the upper back. From here, we're always looking to come up to an elbow. From here, I heist, I turn my hips down and come out. As a result, my knee beats his hip. That's the whole game. My knee outside his hip. His game is to keep his hip outside my knee. It's good for him, but it's not over yet because my shoulders are off the mat. It's not a dominant position for him. Okay? If my shoulders are on the mat, it will truly be a dominant position. From here, look what I do with my hips. My hips are currently facing the ceiling. If I just try to bump into them from here, go strong. It's hard for me to move them. So my first gambit is always to turn my hips down, like so. He tries to get back, but I have such a short distance to move and so much body weight behind it that it's easy for us now to go in and win. So demonstrating solo from here. First, disciplined hand position. Step number 1. He goes to switch the arm across to the other side. I don't care which one switch he's making. I don't care if he's going reverse crossface or reverse underhook. It's all the same to me. From here, I bring my arm across like so. I create a potential lift with my arm. I extend my legs and come up to an elbow. The first motion is to turn my hips down. Turning the hips down makes it easy to knee slide. Don't try to do all this work with your hips facing up to the ceiling. Feels very, very difficult. Your whole thing, hips down and knee slide. So, you got a tough opponent on top of you. Maybe you've seen him grapple before, maybe you have grappled before, and you know from half guard he favors sitting out on people. You know, it's a big part of his game. So, first thing you're going to do is start pulling your hands inside. It's not that difficult to do. Even when he's got a tight crossface, you can always turn temporarily away from a crossface and go back in and get your hands in place. Now he's like, okay, this is not good. He goes to switch his hands. And your elbow goes over and beats him. What I don't want is coming in shallow with the hand. He goes over, and now shallow with the hand, I get caught my arms in. I want my elbow free. So when he goes across, I punch the elbow through, so my elbow is free behind him. Now, from these situations, look how we just get up onto our elbow, like so. Currently, my hips are facing the ceiling. That's, if you're very young and strong, you can still get it to work even with your hips facing the ceiling. But when you're an old geezer like me, you need to turn your hips down. Okay, you gotta be more mechanically efficient. He makes a strong body pushing into me. It's hard for me to get up here with my hips facing up. Gotta be very strong for that. So from here, I just switch my base. I turn my hips down. Now, as he tries to come around the corner, my whole thing is to get my knee behind his lower back. Once you get the knee behind the lower back, it's a pretty easy thing. If he's young and fast, and from here, he starts turning to face you, and his knee comes in, elbow comes in, and he comes right onto sumigation. So be aware of that as a follow-up when you're dealing with a faster opponent. That's a great way to use good arm position. Pommel into your own reverse underhook, and use that to counter sit-outs.